Hi everyone, my name is Kall Loper. I'm going to introduce myself in the middle of the slide, but I just wanted to give everyone else a chance to get in here and fill up this room. The idea here is, in kind of continuing the themes that we've seen from this morning, is taking that progression of information. I think it's a really nice progression to get us here. I'm not talking about particular indicators. I'm not even talking about particular kinds of ransomware. What I'm talking about is what guides our work when we're on a response. And hopefully you find that useful, as you either wonder what your boss wants you to do or start stepping into that role. And as you can tell, I'm older, so I've learned a couple things on the way here, and most of it was what not to do. That's not what I'm going to show you today. First of all, our esteemed founder, I don't know if any of you watch Shark Tank, but I keep this slide just for this joke. For 10% of your company, you get to watch this presentation. If you're not laughing at that, then forget it. All right. The truth is, I've been doing this for about 25 years, and I'm not going to belabor my background. I've done it a lot of different ways. I've done it for the government. I've done it for Big Four consulting. I've done this at a global consulting company that was not in the Big Four, and now I'm in a pure play security company that does a lot of MSS work, but we're also part of the professional services group. So we do the actual response work as opposed to the SOC hunting and the other stuff. But we have a huge array of talent that I can pull from, and that's really comforting. It's also a chance to get back to engineering. I think I forgot to mention on here, I'm also a professor of computer science, but that's just a part-time thing. I came from academia many years ago, where I left as a department chair, decided to get paid. But that's not the cool part. Why am I here today? And I'll let you guess. I've spent years on 2 responses, and it really informs what we're doing here today, and that's why I want to share it with you, because it's relevant background. The first one, if you look on the right there, you'll see an oily pelican. You may recognize this from the Deepwater Horizon event, and that's really what it was. I spent 2 years in the Gulf of Mexico leading data collection in 4 states. We've collected over 100,000, and I mean 100,000 individual pieces of evidence. In that it is an absolutely enormous multi-district litigation. It was a huge, huge event. If you remember back then, some of the people who worked for me hadn't graduated high school. I'm not bitter. But that involved a lot of logistics, but it also involved working with some of the best crisis management people in the world, because they were right there in New Orleans with me. I was in the room with them handling legal and collections. And I got to watch that process, and it really informed. Like, I used to do network security. After that experience, I started doing real incident response. In my mind, it was a demarcation, right? Network forensics versus incident response, where we deal holistically with a crisis in the whole enterprise. That's an important thing. Another thing I learned was in the Sony Pictures hack. I spent 2 years out in Culver City. It was brutal. Don't cry for me. Marina Del Rey can eventually get boring, I assume, but I never quite got to that point in 2 years. It was awesome, but I was away from home a lot. What that taught me, and for those of you who actually know the event, you know that Mandiant came in and did the first month and a half of disclosing who the threat actor was to the entire country before they did the client. But what do I know? I was there for the next 2 years helping them clean it up, and what I really learned was the tail on an incident can be enormous. The impact can be enormous. And what we do during the incident to develop that information and the way we guide our clients during that time is enormously important. So those are the 2 big lessons I learned. I wanted to share them with you as part of the background because it might be relevant. Part of the crisis management approach is looking at the enterprise in a way that you can deal with it. You have to come up with a model, right? Because every enterprise is different. If you've gone into an organization, you know this. They all organize themselves in different ways. Even things that should be relatively routine, like finances and reporting, can be radically different in different companies. We just merged together 2 companies, trust me. It has been a charming, charming thing. Right? But as you go in for an incident, you're not just analyzing a piece of malware, you're not just analyzing an endpoint, or even 1,000 endpoints. What you're really doing is helping that enterprise survive a crisis, and bringing a crisis management approach to it is important. Now, how does that direct your actions? Just so you don't go running out of the room if you're actually a hands-on responder. I was too. I've analyzed malware, I've decompiled malware, I've done it all, been there, but it's been a while. I'm still with my teams in the field. I do the executive advisory for our bigger clients, right? But I also teach our people how to do it with this method, and I'm kind of giving you the distilled version of that. We break the enterprise up into its functional units. They can call themselves whatever they want. They can call it a crisis management team. They can call it an executive leadership team, call it anything. But what it boils down to is you've got a function. The function is the executive. The executive is anybody who can change the plan as soon as they want to. It's a great functional definition of an executive. Doesn't have to be in the C-suite, can be, usually is. But anybody who can decide we're going to do something different because I say so is executive. Fair enough? Just stick with me and say, there's a risk leadership layer. This is a group of people or a strata of people in the enterprise that either will come together during the plan or come together just out of the necessity that there's really only one way to get through this, and it takes them a while and it's a little bit messier. These are the people with a position in the enterprise to make judgments and access to information that allows them to make those judgments well. And usually they're in particular silos with specialties. I'll get into that in just a second to give you a little more background for it. And then there's us, the technical teams. Right? These are the people saving the world, putting out the fires, bringing servers back online, whether it's a technical IT team or an InfoSec team, or whether you're in a really small enterprise where you're the technical team, IT and InfoSec. Right? There's a lot of that in the victims. Where I'm going here is not so much how to discern what threat actors are doing or who they are, but to look at it from the victim side and help them get through it. Fair enough? And then there are flows that go along with this. Authority to act flows down from the executive. Information about what reality is should flow up from the technical team. And the translation in between there can ruin a response. It just can, if you don't do it well, it can just absolutely destroy the enterprise's resilience and ability to come back from this. One thing I wanted to say here about the executive, and that's who we're kind of targeting with this. They're not technical. I walked into a response once, not one of the two that I showed, where there was a CEO talking to a technician. They were both desperate to communicate with the other one and utterly incapable of it. Right? Picture this person trying to explain what the malware is doing and how the systems are working. The CEO just wants to know what's going to happen to the company tomorrow. What do I tell regulators? What do I tell the board? Right? It was, if it wouldn't have been tragic, it was kind of comical. It wasn't to either of them at the time, though. So what I focused on is, as technical people, it's not what we need to say. Right? We're good at this, you're good at this, you're either here or you scammed your boss. Either way, well done. You're probably here because you're good and you want to get better, right? How do you communicate that in a way that's going to be useful? And it's not so much demonstrating our expertise, which is considerable and valuable, but how do we solve the problem at hand? It's an engineering problem, just work the problem. The problem is not what did the malware do, how does it do it? The problem is how does this enterprise stay in business? And that's a perspective that I want to, really develop here. If we think about it, a ransomware event is a business continuity exercise to the executive, but it's a technical exercise to the technical team. And how do you effectively manage that? Crisis management perspective brings in those different team members. We've got the imperative to fix, kind of that technical issue. This is wrong, let's fix it. And then earlier today you heard, well, how do we make this permanent? How do we make ourselves actually not vulnerable to ransomware in the future? Well, in the back of the report after the IOCs, we put down a list of recommendations. Right? Everybody's paying attention today. Right? The thing about the executives is they don't work quite like that. There's going to be a crisis tomorrow that has to do with financial reporting or stock valuation or reputation or a legal challenge or something, and they're just not going to focus on it because we insist that it's very, very important. The CIO, if any of you have worked directly with CIOs, sometimes we make fun of the conflict between the CISO role and the CIO role. CIOs want availability because they have stakeholders that demand access to the system. Information security are famous for being Dr. No. It's a cliche, but it's there, it's legit. How do we get around that? Well, it's hard. It has to do with the scale that we look at things. If we want to be effective in making these recommendations fit, we've got to actually make the details work, which means architecture, which is never easy. It's a lot easier to get a Christmas present on the budget and buy a new silver bullet technology that you're not going to configure to be effective. And then we ask ourselves, why are we doing ransom every couple of years? Well, that's why. It takes actually a lot of focus and attention in business, right? Efficiency is the enemy of resilience. That IT team that should be architecting it and filling the need and planning out the system to be more resilient, it's going to break. And it's just not going to happen. It's going to get half implemented. Somebody's going to change the job. There's 1,000 reasons in the enterprise that have to be considered, even if they're wrong. One of the things, the complaints I heard about the IOCs is, why can't we identify this IOC and then block it? Fair? I just don't want you to fall asleep. I've got this soothing crisis management voice going. Right? Now, what do? Do we block it? Well, what happens then? Then we end up with a bunch of blocking rules in our systems that will randomly break things later because they're not going in any kind of meaningful way. They're not being tracked, or if they are, that tracking is getting lost. Part of what my company does, a big part of it is MSS, right? False positives are actually killers. They break economics, they break clients' will to live and work with you in the future. Right? Think about how many false positives you could generate by searching for PowerShell doing X. How many admins don't know how to solve a problem but can go out and Google something and just run that PowerShell script. And mostly it just works and it doesn't load malware for them. But, right, so do we block PowerShell? Do we restrict the ability of a particular role? The least privileged, what if we implement it ruthlessly? Your IT team's availability metrics are going to go through the floor. The CIO is going to hate you. The business leaders are going to hate you. You're going to lose budget, and 2 years from now, you'll be looking for a new job knowing you did the right thing. And that enterprise will be just as bad off as it was. That doesn't mean it's hopeless. It means that we need to look at this throughout the whole crisis and learn from it and bring some of those collateral skills into our field. I didn't go to business school. I told you I was a computer scientist. I go in and do the hands-on keyboard analysis and, originally digital forensics. I picked up a little bit of law and just started working my way around. With incident response, I learned business continuity, disaster recovery, normal IT process. That's where our field is evolving to, because it's the only thing that's going to be effective in dealing with enterprise security. So I was here to break the news. I deleted a slide. Oh well, risk leadership team, I go through this a lot. Normally we recommend like 3 to 5 members on a crisis management team or leading that. We have internal communications, right? Because you have to communicate to your employees, otherwise they start making things up. Ask me about Sony pictures and people just giving interviews randomly outside the lot because the media was camped there looking for news. External communications, right? Part of the crisis management approach in IR is bringing in a PR firm. And you may have seen those or been on meetings with them or calls, right? Generally, we as technical people don't really care about them too much. Regulatory compliance or the risk management function. They're the ones that own the cyber risk insurance policies, right? So we have to feed them information so they can meet the contractual obligations. Line of business. How does this company generate revenue? And how is this event impacting it? That can be critical to have that person on your risk leadership team, somebody to represent, hey, as annoying as it is to us, hey, we need to be back in business now, right? There's a J curve to how much money we're gonna lose. We can get through today, we might be able to get through tomorrow. After that, we have to start restating financials, we don't make payroll, any number of things that could actually be existential threats to a company, depending on where that company is. Right? That perspective has to be there. So what I'm saying is that middle layer of good judgment that should be communicating well. And legal, let's not forget legal. External counsel, probably run by the Office of General Counsel internally. Right? All those people need to make decisions. Remember communication and authority? They need information coming up from the technical team in a way that they can deal with it and use it. And they can authorize things like, let's take down this production system. The CIO has a heart attack. The business leader might say, we could probably deal with that for a day, or we could send everybody home if it's as bad as you say. I've been in big responses. A global company, 90,000 employees, had somebody exfiltrating the ntds.dit file. Right, we saw it at the perimeter. Oh Lord. Right, we spent till 4:30 in the morning. I got the call at probably about 3 p.m. on a Friday because that's when clients call. And then we were on the phone with them, including their global CIO at 4:30, about ready to pull the trigger on rolling the ticket granting ticket. Right, for a 90,000 person organization with a lot of legacy systems and passwords that were hard-coded into their systems that they didn't even know existed, and everybody acknowledged it, they just didn't like to think about it until right then. Fortunately, we were also running an investigation at the same time, and we found out that only 100 kilobytes of that file was exfiltrated, and we were able to not pull that trigger at the last minute. But everybody understood the risk, and all the judgment needed to do it was in the room. And that's part of running that crisis management approach. You get the authority to do things you need to with the right information in the hands of the right people. You're never going to make people smarter. In the executive leadership team, you can't. But you can keep them better informed and then hopefully get a decision that they can live with. That's the goal. Sufficient. Right? Excellent is great, but sufficient's better. With that in mind, I wanted to run through some of what we normally do. Don't worry, it's not going to be nearly as excruciating as you think. It's not just marketing. I like to look at the security, the full security motion here because it includes response. But I think anticipate is important because we talk a lot about cyber threat intelligence in here. How do you make good decisions without information? You have to take general information and bring it into your situation. It takes a considerable amount of skill and knowledge about our field, all the stuff that we're learning in there. Then we said, what do we do with this? This is brilliant. Like Harlan said, there's no reason to keep this stuff. I was like, no, you're killing me, man. I sell that stuff, right? Part of my offering is a threat analysis center. Now, Nick, who's back there, director of that program, knows that we have not hired the threat analysis center leader yet, but real soon now I know it, and we're working in conjunction with part of our other offerings, right? Trying to get a fusion center kind of thing going. We don't call it that yet. But anticipate, right? In the absence of anything else, let's use the best information we have, make the best decisions we can, and be ready to retrench. Sounds a lot like incident response, doesn't it? Prevent, that's the common thing. Everybody knows that. Respond, that's us, we got that. And then recover, and that's where it can get interesting. So I think we've been through this enough, but I've used this diagram a number of times with clients just to explain to them how ransomware affiliates work and why ransomware threat actors can be predictable. Let's take this up just a notch from the intelligence that we're getting, everywhere in our field. A lot of good providers here, a lot of good information out there, but let's do some analysis with it. What can we infer from the relationship that is ransomware as a service and their affiliate actors and brokers and all the other services they use? Those are third parties who don't trust each other. Changing the plan midstream is a good way to lose affiliates. That alone is a piece of insight that you can bring to your clients. Does that mean that our first guess is going to be right, or because it is this ransom note, then it is that actor who has that reputation? Realize you're reading tea leaves here. Tell your client that and say, we don't know this for certain, but these are the indicators we have. We'll talk to you about them if you want, but really what you want to know is what's going to happen if we pay the ransom. Here's what we predict is most likely. Doesn't even mean it's likely. This is our best guess right now. As we learn more, our guesses will get better. Most executives who can run an enterprise are okay with that. Right? You give it to them, you give them the facts, you give them the warnings, and then they can take action. And they can defensively take action, which is huge. Later, when new facts come out, they can say, we had these facts at the time, we made this decision. Do you disagree? Turns out it was wrong. Then they disagree. Lots of prevent stuff, lots of response stuff, hopefully you know that. Okay. I thought that was funny. Nope, they're asleep. Okay. I'll move around the mic. One of the things that clients have found useful over the years is just what's going to happen if I pay the ransom. What have we found from watching the threat actors? What is our tea leaf level guess? Right? And one of the things that just surprises the heck out of them is
this timeline, and we can estimate that. Is it right? Probably not, but it could be. It's close anyway. There are certain steps that they don't know have to take place, just for their own protection, for their own peace of mind and sanity. They should make sure that they don't just fling bitcoins into the void, hoping the data will come back to them, right? Negotiators usually work that part out. Brokers move the money. A lot of them don't understand that cryptocurrency brokers don't extend credit. So Treasury in their enterprise needs cash. That's an important insight. A lot of businesses are just used to being able to, say, we'll sign a PO, it'll be fine. Like, no, as far as I know, you're going out of business. Speaking as a crypto broker, we're not going to hand you fungible cash in return for a PO. It's not how it works. So is Treasury able to come up with that, or can line of credits be invoked that will get hard currency to them? That's a new thought. And it's something that we can make them aware of with the skill set and the threat intel that we bring in. How are the payments executed? How does that transaction occur? A lot of them don't have crypto wallets. Right? So who comes in to do that? And did you know that if you do that, you have to register as a cash service? Right? To pay that ransom, you have to become a cash service registered with Treasury. Ask me if my company does that. Heck no. No, but thanks for asking. No, that's a lot. And OFAC, right, I know we heard, and be a good citizen, always report it to the Bureau, but understand that if you have an FCPA or a Foreign Corrupt Practices Act violation, that it can be investigated years and years later. If it happens at a foreign subsidiary and you don't know about it, but then suddenly you find it out, right, you're still liable for it. What happens if you pay to an OFAC entity that was unknown to be an OFAC entity at that time? And the FBI didn't say, hey, they're associated with an OFAC entity. What does that look like down the road? You don't know, right? So there are some implications for this that we can make people aware of, help them identify the risks and navigate them. It's the best thing we can do. OFAC, Office of Foreign Asset Control. Now, here's the part that just kills them. Think about this. If any of you have been DBAs, or database administrators, what happens when you suddenly stop a database? Has anybody ever turned off the power on an AS400 or an I-series if you live in modern times? Or a SQL server? Does it handle it gracefully? No. Ransomware does the same thing to them. Right? So if you pay and get your keys back, there's a pretty good chance that what you need most is in a database, which is probably at the very least in need of repair. And you're going to have a certain level of transactions you can't get back. And if it's fully journaled, then good for you. Well done. Usually not the case, at least not all of them. Right? Or are you bringing together information from 3 databases, one of which was kind of a legacy system, so we haven't really done that part yet. Right? Very common. What does return to operations look like, and what is the opportunity cost? You're going to have to take people off of restoring backups and devote bandwidth to rebuilding those servers and deploying keys. You've got a choice to make. We either get slower at the legitimate recovery method for an unknown, untested key that may very well decrypt some stuff, but it may not bring you back to service for weeks.
Are you typically also employing advisory services to help make those decisions as well in terms of what resources and reallocation get up and running, or just the things that need to be together?
It really depends on your company. So when I was with global consulting firms, that was our bread and butter. Advisory was our huge, huge deal. We had a technical team to kind of validate that. Now that I'm with a pure play security company, we're trying to bring in the advisory work. Right? And we're mixing it with our high quality engineers. All right, this is ugly, I get it. But follow with me. Last bit of advisory I wanted to talk about, part of that crisis management plan, a big part of it was regulatory compliance. So even after you recover and you're back in business and the event is over, right? Litigation has a tail that can go out for years. Regulatory compliance has a tail that can go out for months. Think about a financial services organization. I'm not going to name them, but I've got an example right here in my pocket. They had a lot of compliance stuff to do, but they also had a lot of very angry customers. So the technical team was under a lot of stress to get answers. And that's where this crisis management perspective comes in, where it helps to have a layer in between the demands of the executive, then the judgment and authority to act, who can compile that information, translate it into business, and the technical team who's still out there desperately struggling for answers.
Do you find that organizations want to use a different human group to handle the tail as opposed to incident response?
It can.
Do you see requirements?
It depends on the provider. A lot of cyber insurance companies pick their list based on who's going to comply with their billing practices, not necessarily who's going to provide the best service. Am I on a list? Not in this company, no. Am I bitter? Yes. Yes, I am. But having advisory and having forensic capabilities, for those of you who are on the list, congratulations. But understanding how to explain this incident is not something we normally do in the technical strata. This is something at risk management or even executive level, where we're trying to think this through. This is just a quick example. There's this theoretical universe of data. Remember, I'm an academic, so I got to say academic things to the regulators. How do we know what was missing? We brought back the last good backup. We call that the control group because it sounds really good in court. But then we have to acknowledge the risks. How do you, and this is a technical team problem, how do you report stuff you don't know? That's it for an engineer, that's a non-starter. Will the bridge hold up a car? I have no idea what's the bridge made of. Right? Same thing with these. So what we did was find ways to partition risks that the regulators understood, that we could defend later if we were wrong, and that made some sort of sense to people, and the executives actually get this. So we had, the stuff that was exfiltrated, not disclosed, that's what everybody hates. That's the scary, scary data that you don't know is out there because it's gonna jump back later, even if you pay the ransom and the extortion. Yeah, exfiltrated and disclosed in the control group, that's where you're gold. Everything's fine. It's not a great thing that it got out, but now that it's out, you acknowledged it, you counted it, and you were able to show it and report appropriately. Then you have exfiltrated, disclosed, but not in control. You had no idea it was there until you went to the dump site. In fact, looking at it, you think, yeah, this is probably our data, but you can't confirm it. Hashes don't match, content doesn't match. So that goes back to an inferred category, which is scary, and it leads to the risk of failing to report, and that's bad. In control, not exfiltrated, that's great stuff right there, because the bad guys don't have it. And then finally, you include this unknown category, because it's easy to defend that in court with scientific method. You acknowledge there's stuff we don't know. These are the categories, and you can even populate these categories with what you do know, but you also identify them with what you don't. And I'm about to get the shut up. There you go, perfect time. Everybody, thank you for your attention, if not your animation. If you have any questions, feel free. Wait, we have to turn over the rooms?
Yeah, 2 minutes.
So if I understand, small and medium enterprises get impacted by ransomware too often. The stats are very high for them. But they don't have those many people, on the higher level who can coordinate with the ransomware. How do we handle it?
Great question. What the crisis management, classic crisis management tells you is you have to identify roles. Each role has a set of tasks. Each role is defined by a set of tasks. 2, those roles can and sometimes have to collapse into each other, and those tasks have to be prioritized. So you say, maybe your general counsel owns risk management, owns a cyber risk policy. Those roles collapse. If you don't get counsel assistance, man, my heart goes out to hire a lawyer. If nothing else, hire a lawyer. It really is worth it.
Thank you.